I come from a backwater fishing town called Millport, perched on Maine's jagged coastline like a faded barnacle. So damn close to Canada you could chuck a beer can across the border from Old Man Grissom's splintered dock, where he still sits most mornings, fingers cracked and bleeding from decades of hauling lobster traps. Growing up here, I thought my biggest problems would be dodging town drunks or watching high school buddies slowly rot on bar stools at McTeague's Tavern, their dreams drowning in cheap beer and Jameson shots. Turns out those fears were just kid stuff, training wheels for the real nightmares. I learned that the hard way when my boots crunched into Arctic snow for what command casually labeled a routine joint training exercise. "Routine my ass," my friend had muttered when we got the orders, his weathered face creasing like wadded paper as he studied the mission brief, yellow overhead light catching the scar that ran from his left eye to his jawline. Nothing's routine when they don't tell you about the objective. He'd tapped the folder with nicotine-stained fingers. "You mark my words, Hartfield. They're feeding us lies and expecting us to ask for more." I wasn't even some green recruit with mama's cookies in his rucksack and her Bible tucked beneath his body armor. By 2000, I'd clawed my way up to staff sergeant in Special Ops, dragging my sorry ass through Iraqi deserts where the sand blasted your skin raw and the sun could cook your eyeballs in your skull. But then years later, in 2018, orders came down for a classified op in northern Canada, delivered by a stone-faced major whose name I can't even remember now. "Pack for extreme cold weather conditions, Hartfield," he'd said, sliding a folder across his desk that contained almost nothing useful, just satellite photos with half the relevant sections blacked out. "Briefing on location." His fingers lingered on the file a second too long, like he was reluctant to part with even those useless scraps. "What's the objective, sir?" I'd asked, thumbing through the sparse papers, catching glimpses of coordinates and equipment lists that made no sense together. "At least tell me what we're walking into." He'd fixed me with that bureaucratic 1,000-yard stare, the kind they perfect at Pentagon cocktail parties. "Need to know basis, Staff Sergeant." His voice dropped 10 degrees. "And right now, you don't need to know." I didn't question anything. Years of following orders that made no sense had beaten that reflex out of me. Canada? What could possibly be out there besides moose, maple syrup, and polite people apologizing while they froze to death? Canada? Diaz had laughed when I told the team, his gold tooth catching the light as he field-stripped his M4 for the third time that hour. "What are we gonna do? Arrest a rogue Mountie?" He'd slapped my shoulder, leaving a greasy handprint. "Hey, Deck. Maybe they need us to rescue a hockey team trapped in an avalanche." "Keep laughing, asshole," I'd said, but I was chuckling too. "Pack your thermal underwear. Briefing's at 0500. Diaz had grown serious then, fingers pausing over his weapon. "For real though, what's up there that needs our particular skill set? Doesn't add up." "I know," I'd admitted, "but orders are orders." If I could go back in time, I'd grab my younger self by the throat and slam him against the wall until he listened. I'd tell him to run anywhere but north. Christ, I'd slap my smug-ass stupid for not asking more questions, for not paying attention to the warning signs, the major's unblinking stare, the half-redacted files, the way Sergeant Wilson's hand trembled slightly when he handed me the mission roster with 3 names already crossed out. We landed on ice masquerading as runway, the C-130's wheels skidding sideways with a shriek, metal grinding against frozen tarmac as the entire fuselage shuddered like it might tear itself apart. What passed for daylight was a jaundiced smear leaking across the horizon. "Oh, come on," Collins wheezed beside me, his lips already bleeding at the corners from the cold, splitting open with every word. -70? This can't be Canada. I mean, where's the Mounties giving out maple candy and saying sorry about the weather, eh? He laughed and winced as another crack formed at the corner of his mouth. His pristine Arctic gear made him look like a Best Buy employee who'd wandered into NASA by mistake, still crisp and white, price tags barely removed. "Shut your goddamn mouth, Collins," Klein snarled, yanking his hood so tight that only his bloodshot ferret eyes showed through the fur-trimmed opening. The same eyes that had seen too much in Kandahar, that 1,000-yard stare that comes from watching your best friend step on an IED and having to ship him home in garbage bags. This ain't Sandals Resort. Cold already? We haven't even cleared the damn hangar. Mallory hunched nearby like a broken coat rack, 43 going on 70, face webbed with burst capillaries that mapped his 20-year love affair with Jack Daniels. Even now, I could smell the hand sanitizer he'd been drinking since we boarded. Then there was Diaz, who kept cracking his knuckles inside his gloves. Pop, pop, pop. A nervous tic he'd had since Fallujah '04, where he'd broken 3 fingers pulling a civilian kid from collapsed rubble. 6'2" of wiry Dominican with shoulders like coat hangers. Deck, Diaz muttered, eyes scanning the horizon like a twitchy radar dish, pupils darting from snowdrift to outcropping to shadow. His breath quickened, forming rapid-fire puffs of vapor. Something strange here, man. Feel it? Like eyes on us, watching from the snow, from underneath it. He crossed himself, a gesture I'd never seen him make before. My abuela would have turned around already, said some places don't want people in them. My squad, more dysfunctional than a family therapy session on Jerry Springer, with baggage heavy enough to sink a battleship. But they were mine, and I'd take a bullet for any of them. Even Collins, who was currently trying to take a selfie with his phone despite explicit orders to leave all personal electronics on the transport. Eyes front, ladies, I barked, snatching Collins' phone and shoving it into my pocket. Secure your stuff and zip it tight unless you want to freeze your face off. This ain't a damn field trip to the snow cone factory. We trudged toward a half-buried concrete bunker erupting from the ice, each step punching through the snow crust with a sound like snapping femurs. Outside the bunker entrance, a voice scraped my right ear, close enough I felt warm breath against my frozen skin. They found another one last week, 3,000 years old, frozen mid-scream, still had all its teeth. Perfect preservation. I spun around, hand going to my sidearm, heart slamming against my ribs. Nobody close, just a stone-faced ranger about 15 feet away, fiddling with his rifle sling, staring through me with pale blue eyes so light they were almost white. You hear that? I asked Diaz. Hear what? He looked around nervously. Nobody said anything, man. The airlock to the bunker sucked us in with a wet hiss, like some massive creature inhaling. Inside waited a rat maze of corroded metal corridors barely taller than my 6 feet, forcing Diaz to duck constantly. No flags, no emblems, no identifying markers of any kind. Nothing to say whose black budget funded this nightmare or what country technically claimed this frozen hell. Jesus suffering Christ on a pogo stick, Mallory spat, ducking under a pipe oozing rust-colored slime that froze into bloody stalagmites at our feet. Who designed this place? A sadistic mole person. I've seen submarine toilets roomier than this. And cleaner. He kicked at something skittering across the floor, a pale, multi-legged creature that vanished into a crack in the wall. It's warmer than outside, Collins offered. Son, I said, flexing fingers I couldn't feel inside my gloves. That's like saying gangrene is better than amputation. You'll still lose the leg. I clapped him on the shoulder. Stick close to Diaz. He runs hot enough to qualify as a space heater. Go to hell, Deck, Diaz muttered, but shifted closer to Collins anyway. That was Diaz. All bark, no bite unless you truly crossed him. Then, God help you. We'd shuffled maybe 50 yards when Captain Scarecrow materialized from a side passage. His name tape read, Rayburn, in faded thread. Welcome to Operation Permafrost, gentlemen, he rasped, voice like he'd been gargling glass shards and gasoline. I'd say welcome to the Arctic, but the Arctic doesn't welcome anyone. It tolerates us until it decides to kill us. His smile stretched only the bottom half of his face, the top remaining corpse still. Follow me. Try not to touch the walls. Residue. He didn't elaborate on what residue meant, just turned with military precision and marched down the narrow corridor, forcing us to hustle after him. He led us into a closet pretending to be a briefing room. A yellowed projection screen hung crookedly on one wall, displaying a map speckled with dew line stations. Cold War leftovers scattered across the tundra like some giant's abandoned chess game. Rayburn's been here 4 months, Diaz whispered, his lips barely moving, breath hot against my ear. Word is he hasn't slept more than 90 minutes straight since February. The Rangers say he stopped going outside after seeing something on the ice shelf. Pops awake drugs like M&Ms, uppers to stay conscious, downers to stop the shakes. Listen up, Rayburn snapped. We're investigating communication anomalies, signal interference, possibly leftover Soviet signals intelligence. Russians established sites up here during the Cold War, abandoned all kinds of hardware when the wall fell. He clicked to another slide showing what appeared to be a massive antenna array half buried in ice. Some of it still active. Klein snorted through his nose, a sound like tearing fabric. In Canada? Soviets get lost on their way to Alaska? Make a wrong turn at Vladivostok? He looked around for approval, found none as we all sensed the tension rolling off Rayburn in waves. I mean, sir, the geography doesn't… Rayburn's head snapped toward Klein so fast I heard vertebrae pop. You find strategic geopolitical containment amusing, specialist? His gaze dropped to Klein's chest. No, sir, Klein mumbled. Just trying to understand the mission parameters. Outstanding. Rayburn's index finger tapped against his thigh. Rules. Non-negotiable. Failure to comply will result in immediate discipline. First, no comms in or out without my explicit approval. This includes personal devices, which should have been surrendered already. Second, each night at exactly 0300 hours, you monitor a specific shortwave frequency. Record what you hear. Don't analyze. Don't interpret. Just record. Third, report anything unusual, but under no circumstance engage. If you see something moving on the perimeter, you report it. You do not approach, you do not investigate. Fourth, the Rangers. Respect their terrain knowledge, but don't indulge their folklore. He hesitated on that last word, eyes darting to a corner of the ceiling like he was checking for listeners. We're recording random radio static at 3 a.m.? Collins whispered to me, eyes wide with genuine confusion. What kind of mission is that? Sounds like some X-Files stuff. Diaz raised his hand like a third grader who needed to pee. Old habits from Catholic school never quite died. Sir, with respect, anomalies is pretty damn vague. What exactly are we looking for? What parameters define unusual? Rayburn's jaw clenched. Strange signals outside normal bands. Frequencies that shouldn't exist or can't be triangulated. Equipment failures with no mechanical explanation. Compasses spinning. Electronic cycling power without human input. Batteries draining in minutes. Missing personnel. His eyes pinballed around the room, never settling on any one spot for more than a second, like he was tracking invisible flies. There have been incidents, sightings, men with 20 years of Arctic experience reporting things that don't conform to known parameters. Sightings of what, sir? Collins asked, voice cracking like thin ice underfoot. Rayburn stared through him like he'd turned to glass. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped an octave. Gear stowed. 0600 tomorrow. Check out Radar Station 7. Full Arctic kit. Weapons loaded but safetied. Corporal Niski will show you to your quarters. Dismissed. He turned away, conversation clearly over, though I caught him popping what looked like prescription pills as we filed out. Deck, Mallory called after we'd been led to our quarters, as we dumped gear on metal bunks in a room the size of a shipping container, walls sweating with condensation that froze into psychedelic patterns. He lowered his voice, gesturing me closer. You buying this communication anomaly stuff? My crap detector's redlining harder than my ex's American Express at Nordstrom. That guy's either ghost hunting or running from something he found. I dropped my pack on the thin mattress, testing its give with my hand. Rock solid, like sleeping on a morgue slab. Don't know, but those Rangers looked at us like men already in body bags. I unzipped my parka enough to dig out Colin's phone, tossing it back to him. No pictures, no calls. Keep it off unless we need it. Drama queen much? Klein snorted, arranging his gear. It's equipment checks in the middle of nowhere. Weather balloons and drunk locals seeing the northern lights through too much vodka. Happens all the time in Alaska. People go snowblind, start seeing shit. Collins hunched on his bunk. "Not helping my anxiety, guys," he said, voice barely audible over the constant mechanical hum that permeated the facility. "Just hoped I'd deploy somewhere. Warmer. With enemies I could actually see." His eyes darted to shadows in the corners of the room. "Give me insurgents any day over whatever the hell this is." I tried to smile, but my face muscles felt frozen solid. "Sleep while you can. Tomorrow's gonna be a special kind of suck without adding sleep dep." I didn't mention the bad feeling settling into my gut like concrete. The same feeling I'd had in Fallujah right before an ambush took out half our convoy. Some primal instinct screaming that we'd walked willingly into a trap. Morning arrived at 5:30 with the shriek of pipes. Corporal Niski marched down the corridor beating a dented trash can lid with a wrench, the metallic clang echoing in my skull like church bells in a hangover. The mess hall, a repurposed storage bay reeking of industrial cleaner, featured metal tables carved with curse words and insignias dating back to the first Bush administration. I gagged down what generously passed for breakfast, powdered eggs and coffee so stale it could strip paint off a tank. "This scramble tastes like something that died during the Carter administration and was preserved in formaldehyde," Mallory growled, poking at the yellow mass with his fork like he was checking if it was still alive. "And this bacon? Pretty sure I laced my boots with tougher meat than this in Fallujah. At least that jerky had flavor." "You gonna finish that toast?" Diaz asked, fingers already snatching the blackened remains from Collins's tray before he could answer. Collins pushed his tray away, untouched. The kid's face had taken on a grayish hue. "Can't eat," he whispered, swallowing hard. "Kept hearing things last night, outside the window, scratching, like fingernails on ice." "Just the wind, Boot," Klein said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Arctic plays tricks on your ears, makes ordinary sounds seem wrong." Before anyone could respond, Lieutenant Parker stormed in. Unlike us sleep-deprived zombies, he looked disturbingly alert, face freshly shaved, eyes too bright. Like he'd been up doing push-ups since 0300, or maybe hadn't slept at all. "Listen up, ladies," Parker barked as he stabbed a stubby, scarred finger at the ops map spread on the table. "Station 7, 10 clicks northeast. Non-responsive monitoring system. Dark for 72 hours. Maintenance crew was supposed to check 3 days ago. Never returned." His voice betrayed no emotion, like he was ordering pizza instead of sending us into what was obviously a situation that had already swallowed one team. "Weather window slams shut at 1400 when this front hits. In and out, 2-hour max. Full kit, extreme weather gear, standard comms. Questions?" 10 minutes later, we crammed ourselves into 2 Swedish bandvagns, ancient tracked boxes from the Cold War with more duct tape than original parts. Klein claimed shotgun with his usual "I'll puke all over you" routine. I got sandwiched between Mallory's elk-sized shoulders and Colin's perpetual fidgeting. The kid couldn't keep still if you stapled him to the seat. "First field op?" I asked him, keeping my voice low. "First, whatever this is," Collins replied, teeth chattering despite the layers between him and the cold. "Thought I'd be in Afghanistan by now. Not this." He gestured at the empty white wasteland beyond the narrow viewport, his gloved hand trembling. "Does it ever feel like the snow is watching us?" "Just focus on the objective," I said, ignoring how his question made my skin crawl. "In and out, like the LT said." Station 7 materialized through whirling snow after an hour of kidney-pulverizing travel. A concrete bunker with a dome perched atop it like a crushed egg. Soviet-era brutalist design, built to withstand direct nuclear hits. But the main gate was missing. Not just open, completely gone. Its twisted remains lay 20 feet away, crumpled like an aluminum beer can stomped by a giant boot. "Jesus suffering Christ," Parker muttered, stomping the brakes hard enough to send Diaz face first into the seat ahead. "What the ever-loving hell? That gate's rated for armor-plated battering rams. Could stop a T-90 tank cold." "Wind damage?" Klein suggested. The joke fell flat against the evidence before us. "Maybe the maintenance crew took it off for repairs?" Collins barked a laugh that sounded like mental stability snapping. Wind doesn't tear quarter-inch steel off reinforced concrete footings and origami it into modern goddamn art, Professor. He made the sign of the cross, a gesture I'd never seen from him before. No way we're going in there. Right? He looked around for confirmation, finding none. Guys, we're reporting this shit and heading back, right? Parker's face hardened. Mission parameters unchanged. We secure the station, document what happened, recover any personnel if possible. His tone brooked no argument. Standard tactical entry, weapons hot but safetied. 20 minutes in and out, no stragglers. Parker signaled, and we stacked up in breach position, weapons high, breath pluming before us in clouds that froze and shattered mid-air with crystalline tinkling sounds. I took point, M4 at high ready. The door was bent outward, just like the gate. Whatever had left had been in a hurry. Inside, we were met with a scene that redefined horror. The walls bristled with bullet holes, hundreds, maybe thousands, clustered in patterns suggesting someone had emptied magazine after magazine at fast-moving targets. But it was the blood that turned my guts to ice water. It wasn't just splattered across surfaces in typical arterial spray patterns I'd seen too many times in combat. It hung suspended in mid-air, frozen at the moment of impact. Perfect crimson spheres hovering at different heights, like some demented zero-gravity Christmas display. Some droplets floated 4 feet up, perfectly preserved, defying every law of physics I knew. "Oh God," Mallory whispered, voice cracking like thin ice underfoot. His hand instinctively clutched the cross beneath his tactical vest. "Who did the shooting? And where's the brass?" He was right. Not one single shell casing littered the floor, despite walls chewed to Swiss cheese by what must have been thousands of rounds. "And what were they shooting at?" I murmured, examining a bullet impact. "Don't touch anything," Parker ordered. "Document and move. 20 minutes, gentlemen." The corridor opened into the main control room, a space that should have been humming with electronic activity, but instead sat silent as a mausoleum. Ancient 1980s tech lined the walls, shattered CRT screens, overturned chairs, broken equipment scattered like the room had been tossed by a tornado. "Smells like Texas Chainsaw Massacre meets electrical fire meets something that crawled out of hell," Collins whispered when he joined us. "Found nothing outside except more floating blood drops, suspended like they're hanging from invisible fishing line, and footprints heading north. Single file. At least 6 people." He swallowed hard. "All barefoot. In -70 weather." "Jesus," Diaz breathed, crossing himself. "Barefoot? That's not possible. Toes would snap off in minutes." "Unless they weren't human toes," Collins replied, voice dropping to a barely audible whisper. "Guys," Mallory hissed suddenly. "Oh God, over here." We turned in unison, following his shaking finger toward what we'd all somehow missed when entering. An alcove on the far side of the room, shrouded in shadow despite the strobing emergency lights. Against the far wall stood, floated, a soldier, or what remained of one. Suspended an inch off the floor, arms outstretched crucifixion style, back arched in a spasm that looked anatomically impossible without a broken spine. His mouth stretched so wide the jaw had dislocated. You could almost hear the scream despite the silence. His uniform, pristine 1960s U.S. Army winter gear with 109 Signal Battalion patches. His name tape read Mark in block letters, and beneath it, a blood type designator, O negative. "This isn't real," Mallory breathed, inching closer like a moth to flame. "This poor bastard's been here for decades. Vietnam-era uniform. Perfect condition." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Not even a cobweb on him." "Don't touch him," Parker warned, hand instinctively going to his radio before stopping himself, knuckles white against the black plastic. "No unauthorized transmissions. We document. We leave. That's it." "Are you kidding me?" I hissed, gesturing at the suspended corpse, the floating blood, the impossibility of the scene around us. "We've got a Vietnam-era soldier floating like a goddamn magic trick. Blood drops defying gravity, bullet holes melted by something that isn't gunfire, and we're radio silent because Captain Tweaker said so." My voice had risen despite my best efforts, echoing off the concrete walls. "Sir, with all due respect, this is above our pay grade. Way above. We need to call this in now." Parker's jaw clenched so tight I heard molars crack. "You think I don't know that, Sergeant?" he whispered, voice tight with controlled panic. "You think I want to be here any more than you do? But our orders are clear. We report every detail when we return. For now, secure the station. That's a direct order." His eyes held mine, pleading for compliance. "We have 18 minutes before extraction. Let's not be here a second longer than necessary." We continued the search, each room more wrong than the last. Violence everywhere, but no bodies except our floating friend. Blood spatter patterns indicated at least 4 more casualties, but no corpses to be found. A cafeteria with tables overturned and meals still sitting on plates, frozen solid mid-meal. The barracks with beds made to military precision except for one, which looked like something had burst upward through the mattress. In the records room, Collins discovered a dusty Sony cassette player behind a filing cabinet, along with a stack of unlabeled tapes. He brushed away cobwebs with a shaking hand, revealing that only one had writing, block letters in faded Sharpie that sent a chill down my spine. "They're inside, wearing our faces." "Think we should play it?" Collins asked, holding the cassette between thumb and forefinger like a live grenade with the pin pulled. "No way," Diaz snapped, snatching it away and shoved it into his pocket. "Not till we know what turned this place into the Thing's summer home. Not till we're behind 6 feet of reinforced concrete with a flamethrower handy." As we finished documenting the records room, I caught Mallory sneaking back toward the frozen soldier out of the corner of my eye. I followed at a distance, watching as he crouched near the hovering corpse, examining something on the floor beneath Mark's suspended boots. A jagged splinter of yellowish material, maybe bone or antler, lay on the concrete. Etched into its surface were symbols that seemed to shift and squirm when viewed directly, becoming clearer in peripheral vision. Mallory, of course, picked it up. Despite my warning hiss, he pocketed it, flashing a grin that didn't reach his bloodshot eyes. The smile of an addict who's found a fix. "Souvenir," he whispered, patting his pocket. "Might help figure out what clown show we stumbled into. Maybe get us some answers." "Put that shit back," I growled, grabbing his arm hard enough to bruise. "Don't mess with things you don't understand, Mal. Especially not artifacts found near a decades-dead corpse frozen in mid-scream. Remember Iraq? The museum pieces?" Nichols took that clay tablet and 3 days later. "Relax, Deck," he replied, rolling bloodshot eyes. He yanked his arm from my grasp with surprising strength. "Just a piece of carved antler some Eskimo dropped. No biggie. Not like it's connected to Floating Joe in there." But his fingers kept straying to his pocket, stroking the outline of the fragment through the fabric. "Time's up," Parker called from the corridor. "We are leaving, now." We completed our sweep in record time, no one wanting to spend another unnecessary second in that cursed place. When we reported to Rayburn back at base, his reaction was, "Wrong. File your report," he said, still not meeting our eyes, voice flat and mechanical. "Facts only. No interpretation. No speculation." "Sir," I pressed, leaning forward, hands white-knuckling the edge of his desk. "With respect, what we found isn't just abnormal, it's impossible. What the hell is happening here?" His eyes finally flicked to mine, then away. "Your job is to report observations, Sergeant. Not analyze them. Command will assess your findings. The explanation is likely mundane. Temperature anomalies, pressure differentials, known phenomena in extreme conditions." "But the soldier," Collins interjected. His hair had started falling out in clumps, I noticed. Stress reaction, or something else? "He's been frozen there for decades. Shouldn't we recover his remains? Contact his family? He has had people who loved him, who never knew what happened. And tell them what exactly?" Rayburn replied, voice suddenly polar cold. "That we found him levitating like a David Copperfield trick? That he's been perfectly preserved with no scientific explanation? That his eyes seem to follow movement after 40 years of supposed death?" His voice had risen, control slipping. He stays put unless ordered otherwise. Written report by 1900. Dismissed. But as we turned to leave, Rayburn spoke again, voice so low I almost missed it. Sergeant Hartfield, whatever you found out there, whatever you brought back, get rid of it. His eyes finally met mine fully, and what I saw in them was pure, undiluted terror. Before tonight, before 3 a.m., please. If only we'd chosen ignorance right then and there. If only we'd said screw the mission and demanded extraction. If only I'd forced Mallory to return that damned bone fragment, or at least thrown it into the incinerator myself. That evening, we got assigned to Observation Post Charlie, a concrete pillbox masquerading as a bunker, perched on a rocky outcrop that some Pentagon desk jockey had optimistically labeled a strategic overlook. Inside wasn't much better than outside. A cramped 12 by 18-foot main room with rusted metal cots bolted to the walls, their paper-thin mattresses stiff as plywood and stained with God knows what from previous occupants. Off to one side, a small chamber barely larger than a closet housed our comms equipment, including the shortwave radio for our mandatory 3 a.m. rendezvous with whatever the hell was broadcasting that signal. "Check your watches," Parker ordered, voice too loud in the confined space. He synchronized his battered Casio G-Shock. "We're on frequency at exactly 0300 local. Not a minute before, not a minute after." We drew straws for watch shifts, Parker obviously rigging it so Collins got the midnight slot, punishment for some perceived slight at breakfast when the kid had questioned the mission parameters. I pulled 4 to 6 a.m., the absolute worst slot, when your body temperature hits its lowest and the cold seems to seep directly into your bone marrow like liquid nitrogen injected into your veins. "No sleeping on watch," Parker added unnecessarily, pacing the small room like a caged animal. The man hadn't sat down once since we'd arrived, constantly checking the door, the windows, the comms equipment. Anything unusual gets logged, and I mean anything. Sounds, lights, movement, even if you think you imagined it. "What exactly are we watching for, Lieutenant?" Diaz asked, cleaning his rifle for the third time since we'd arrived. Parker stopped his pacing. "Just anything that doesn't belong in an Arctic wasteland. You'll know it when you see it." By 2200 hours, everyone except Collins was trying to sleep, wrapped in military-issue mummy bags rated for Arctic conditions that still somehow let the cold seep through like the nylon, and insulation weren't even there. Then, at exactly 0255, Klein shook me roughly, waking me up from a restless slumber. "Almost time for our date with the mystery DJ," he said, trying for humor but missing by a mile. "Can't wait to hear what kind of messed-up remix is playing tonight." After swinging my legs off the cot, bare feet hitting the freezing concrete floor like a shock of electricity, I scanned the small room, mentally accounting for everyone, a habit born from too many bad situations where the count came up wrong. "Where's Mallory?" I asked, sudden dread clenching my gut like a fist. "In the bathroom," Collins mumbled from where he sat cross-legged on the floor. "Been in there 20 minutes. Maybe more." "He was messing with that bone thing again," Diaz added, sitting up in his cot. "The thing he took from the floating man. Had it hanging around his neck on some kind of cord he made. Kept staring at it like it was talking to him or something." "Talking to him?" My mouth went desert dry. Diaz nodded, glancing nervously at the bathroom door. "Yeah, man," holding it up to his ear, nodding like he was having a conversation. Said it was getting warm to the touch. Started glowing too. Just a little, like an ember in a dying fire. I saw it. My stomach dropped like I'd stepped off a cliff. "Warm? In this cursed mausoleum? That's not possible. Why the hell didn't you tell me this sooner?" I demanded, already moving toward the small latrine alcove. "I thought he was just messing with us," Diaz replied defensively, scrambling to his feet. "You know how he gets. Always pulling that mystic bullshit, trying to freak out the new guy. Remember what he did to Rodriguez in Kandahar with the camel spider?" But we both knew this was different. The bathroom door was locked from the inside, not just latched but seemingly sealed, no light visible through the cracks. I pounded on it 3 times, the metal so cold it burned my knuckles. "Mallory, We're due for radio watch in 3 minutes. Get your ass out here." Nothing. Not a sound from within. Parker appeared at my shoulder, fully dressed despite supposedly being asleep moments before. "Problem, Sergeant." "Mallory's been in there too long," I said, not caring how it sounded. "Something's wrong. He's been acting strange since he picked up that bone fragment." "Probably just constipated from those MREs," Parker replied with forced casualness, but he drew his sidearm anyway, thumbing off the safety. "Mallory, open this door now. That's an order." "Screw this," I muttered, stepping back, drawing my sidearm. "Collins, help me breach it." Together we slammed our combined weight against the door, shoulders burning with the impact. The cheap lock gave way with a crack that sounded like breaking bones, the door flying inward to reveal nothing. An empty bathroom. No Mallory. Just a small window, previously sealed against the elements with caulk and duct tape, now hanging open like a gaping wound. Arctic air poured in like liquid nitrogen, crystallizing on every surface, turning the small space into an ice cave. "Gosh," Parker breathed. "Where the hell did he go? That window's barely big enough for a child, and it's a 15-foot drop to the ground." I moved to the window, peering into the darkness. Through the swirling white, I caught a glimpse of footprints leading away from the building, single file, perfectly straight, as if Mallory had walked away with mechanical precision. "Sir," Diaz called from the comms room. "It's 0300. Frequency's hot." At exactly 3 a.m., Klein switched on the shortwave radio per protocol, his hand hovering over the dial as if reluctant to make contact. Static hissed for a moment like angry snakes, the sound filling the small room with electric menace. Then it changed. The static abruptly cut to a rhythmic thumping that filled the small room like physical pressure. A deep thud, 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 thud that didn't sound electronic at all. Not like any radio transmission I'd ever heard in decades of military service. It sounded organic, biological, like a massive heart the size of a house, beating somewhere beneath our feet, reverberating through the earth itself. But beneath the heartbeat, almost subliminal, I heard something else. Voices. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them, whispering in a language that sounded wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. Yet somehow I understood fragments. Promises of warmth, of knowledge, of power. Offers to take away the fear, to show me wonders I couldn't imagine. All I had to do was step outside. Collins sank to his knees, palms pressed hard against his ears. "Make it stop," he moaned, rocking back and forth. "Please, make it stop. They're saying my name. They know my fucking name." "Jesus!" Diaz shouted, clutching his head like it might explode, fingers digging into his scalp hard enough to draw blood. "Just record it and turn it off," I yelled back, my own head feeling like an overinflated balloon about to burst. After what felt like eternity but was probably only minutes according to the digital clock, the signal faded to static, then blessed silence. We collapsed to the ground, all nursing splitting headaches that felt like our brains were trying to excavate escape routes through our eye sockets. "That wasn't normal," Collins gasped between ragged breaths. "That wasn't any radio signal. That was something else, something alive." He looked up. "It knows we're here. It's coming for us." "No shit, Harvard," Klein growled, but his usual edge was dulled by pain. "Parker, we need to call this in, right now. Whatever this is, it's beyond our pay grade." Before Parker could respond, movement in the doorway caught my attention, triggering every combat-honed instinct I possessed. I whipped around, hand already halfway to my sidearm before I recognized the figure. Mallory stood there, rigid as a statue, arms hanging loosely at his sides like they weren't quite connected to his shoulders properly. "Mallory?" I called, reaching for my sidearm without conscious thought. No response, not even a blink, not a flicker of recognition. "Mallory!" I snapped my fingers directly in front of his face, close enough to feel his breath against my skin. He blinked slowly, eyelids moving out of sync. "Sorry, what? Where the hell were you?" Parker demanded. but his tone lacked its usual authority. "Why'd you go outside? That's a direct violation of protocol. You could have frozen to death." "Outside?" Mallory's brow furrowed in confusion. "I didn't." He trailed off, gaze dropping to the pendant in his hand as if seeing it for the first time, though it had clearly been fashioned into a necklace with care. I heard whispering coming from this, saying my name. He lifted the bone fragment, turning it slowly in the light. It showed me things. Beautiful things. The stars are different up there, did you know that? Different patterns. They're moving into alignment. He blinked again, seeming to come back to himself slightly, his normal voice breaking through. "You're bleeding." "So are you," I replied, pointing to the dark crimson trail leaking from his left nostril. Mallory touched his face, staring at the blood on his fingertips with detached fascination. "I need some air. It's too crowded in here now." "What do you mean, crowded?" Collins asked, voice trembling. "It's just us." "Sergeant, you're staying inside," Parker ordered, finding a fragment of his command voice, though he made no move to physically stop Mallory. In fact, he took a step back, hand hovering near his sidearm. "That's an order. We need to get you to medical." Mallory paused, neck bent nearly to his shoulder. "Stars," he repeated softly, voice dreamy and distant. "Beautiful stars. Coming into alignment. They'll be here soon." Then he pushed through the door into the Arctic night, moving with sudden fluid grace that contradicted his earlier jerky movements. The door slammed behind him with finality, the sound echoing in the small space like a gunshot. "Jesus," Diaz whispered, crossing himself. "We need to go after him." "In a minute," Parker said, the hesitation in his voice betraying his fear. "Let me call this in first. Get orders." We were too rattled to argue further. Parker radioed in the incident, his voice clinical and detached as if reading from a script, carefully omitting any mention of the bone fragment or the way Mallory had moved. I should have gone after Mallory immediately, should have tackled him, restrained him, forced that damned bone fragment from his hand before it was too late. But my head felt like it was splitting open, vision still swimming with afterimages of the signal, and before I knew it, a scream tore through the night like fabric ripping, high and inhuman, starting in a register recognizable as Mallory's voice, but climbing rapidly into something else entirely, a sound no human throat could produce. It cut off abruptly, as if a switch had been flipped, the silence that followed somehow worse than the scream itself. We jolted awake as one, already reaching for weapons. "Mallory," Collins breathed, eyes wide with terror. "That was Mallory. Oh God, oh Jesus, that was Mallory." "Gear up," Parker barked, suddenly all military efficiency again now that he had a protocol to follow. 3 minutes, full Arctic kit. We threw on Arctic gear with efficiency born from years of drills. Thermal underwear, insulated pants, parkas, balaclavas, goggles, boots. Parker chambered around in his M9 with a metallic snap. "Standard search pattern," he ordered. "Nobody goes solo, not for a second. Collins, you're with me. Diaz and Hartfield take east perimeter. Second team, secure the bunker. Radio check every 2 minutes. Weapon status?" "Hot," we responded in unison. The cold hit like a baseball bat to the chest when we emerged, stealing my breath and instantly cementing my eyelashes together. Visibility was less than 30 feet, the world beyond our immediate surroundings swallowed by swirling white. "Mallory!" Parker shouted, voice instantly swallowed by the vast emptiness. "Sergeant Mallory, report." No response but the moaning wind, carrying what sounded disturbingly like laughter. We followed Mallory's boot prints through fresh powder, the trail eerily straight, each footprint precisely the same distance apart, as if he'd been marching to some unheard cadence. The tracks led behind the bunker toward a small rise, then stopped abruptly at the edge of a sheer drop-off that plunged 30 feet to a frozen lake below. "What the hell?" Klein muttered, swinging his tactical light in wide arcs over the cliff edge. "Did he jump? That's a 30-foot drop onto solid ice. No way he survives that, even if he landed right." We trained our lights downward, sweeping the base of the cliff, expecting to see a broken body. But there was nothing. No impact marks below, no sign of disturbed snow. The footprints simply ended, like he'd been plucked straight up into the sky by some giant invisible hand. "Spread out," Parker ordered, though his voice had lost its parade ground confidence. 10-foot radius from last known position. Watch each other's backs. We moved in widening circles, sweeping lights across virgin snow, weapons at high ready, though none of us could articulate what we were preparing to shoot. Then Klein's boot caught on something buried in a drift, sending him sprawling forward with a startled yelp. "Shit!" he yelped, scrambling backward on all fours like a panicked crab, eyes wide with horror. "Oh God! Oh God!" I pushed forward, knowing before I saw it that we'd found Mallory, or what remained of him. He lay half buried in snow like he'd been dropped from a great height, but not directly below where his tracks ended. He was 20 yards east, in an area we hadn't made prints in yet, as if he'd been carried through the air and deliberately placed. His limbs were contorted, broken bones jutting through his Arctic camo like pale twigs through tissue paper. The snow around him was pristine, unmarked, but his face… God, his face wasn't cut or torn or mauled. It was gone. The entire front of his skull had been removed. "We need to get inside," Parker ordered, his voice breaking on the last word, all pretense of military bearing abandoned. "Now, right fucking now." "What about Mallory?" Collins asked between heaves, strings of bile freezing on his chin before they could fall, crystallizing into amber beads. "We can't just leave him." "Jesus, we can't just leave him out here like this." "He's gone," I said flatly, the soldier in me taking over when the human wanted to scream, to run, to curl into a ball and deny the reality before me. "There's nothing we can do for him now. We report, we document, we retrieve the remains when we have backup." As we stood there processing the impossible, a faint harmonic humming started up from the darkness beyond our flashlight beams. "Move," Parker whispered, primal panic overriding military bearing, his eyes so wide the whites were visible all the way around. "Inside. Now." We scrambled back to the bunker, slipping and stumbling through drifts, abandoning all pretense of tactical movement. I risked one glance back and immediately wished I hadn't. Something large moved at the edge of visibility, a darker shadow against the night, flowing rather than walking. For a split second I thought I saw Mallory's face floating within that darkness, eyes wide and aware, mouth moving in words I couldn't hear but somehow understood. "Run. Don't look back. They're coming." Inside, we slammed the metal door, throwing the bolt and dragging a storage cabinet in front of it for good measure, as if furniture could stop whatever had taken Mallory. Parker's hands shook so badly he dropped the radio handset twice before managing to call in, his report clinical and detached, stripped of any details that might sound too fantastical. Rayburn's voice came back. "Understood. Record all details. Secure the remains at first light. Stand by for further instructions." "That's it?" I exploded when Parker set down the handset, my voice sounding shrill even to my own ears, control slipping after days of accumulated horror. "Mallory just got his face peeled off by something that isn't supposed to exist, and all they can say is to stand the fuck by?" They knew. They knew this would happen. "Well, we're finding out the hard way," Klein muttered, obsessively checking and rechecking the locks on the windows. "Can we at least agree we're not dealing with Soviet equipment anymore? Because I'm pretty damn sure the Russians didn't leave behind face-eating shadow monsters when the wall fell. This is something else. Something older. Something that was here before us," Collins whispered, huddled in a corner, arms wrapped around his knees. "Something that was sleeping until we woke it up. With the towers, the signals. We're the intruders here." "Enough," Parker ordered. "We hold position until dawn. No one goes outside. No one goes anywhere alone. Not even to take a piss. We stick together and wait for extraction." None of us slept for the remaining 5 hours of darkness. When dawn finally broke, we wrapped Mallory's frozen remains in a body bag. It took all 4 of us to lift him. I noticed something missing as we secured him in the truck's cargo bay, throwing tarps and gear around the body to keep it from shifting during the bumpy ride back to base. "The pendant," I said suddenly, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "The bone thing, it's gone." "You think whatever killed him took it back?" Collins asked, crossing himself again, the gesture now as much reflex as conscious action. "Reclaiming what belongs to it? Or maybe it was never meant to leave that station in the first place," Diaz replied grimly, eyes constantly scanning the horizon, weapon never more than an inch from his hand. "Maybe there are things we aren't meant to take, places we aren't meant to go." As we pulled away from observation post Charlie, I glanced back through the rear viewport. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing on the outcrop, a tall, thin silhouette against the lightening sky. It raised one elongated arm in what might have been a farewell. Then the swirling snow obscured it, and we were alone on the endless white plain, heading back to base with one less man and far more questions than answers. Questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered anymore. In the days after hauling Mallory's mutilated corpse back to base, Collins started unraveling faster than cheap bootlaces left in Arctic frost. The kid had always been high-strung, but now he'd crossed into territory that made my combat PTSD buddies from Kandahar look like yoga instructors. The fourth night after Mallory, something snapped. I was shuffling back from taking a leak when Collins's hand shot out and clamped around my forearm. His fingers dug in with the desperate strength of a drowning man, leaving 5 perfect teardrop bruises that lasted weeks. "Deck," he whispered. "She's outside again. My mom. Just standing in the snow." His breath caught with a sound like ripping fabric. "She's wearing her yellow sundress, the one with the little white daisies. The one they buried her in." Glacial fingers traced my spine. "Your mom's dead?" Collins nodded once. "Pancreatic cancer. 3 years, 4 months, 12 days ago." His eyes fixed on mine, bloodshot and fever bright. "But it's her voice, man. I'd know it fucking anywhere. That Oklahoma twang she never could shake. She's calling me to come outside. Says she misses me. Says it's not so cold once you get used to it." "It's just the wind playing tricks," I said. "Military training kicking in like muscle memory. Establish control. Stabilize the situation. Prevent cascade failure. These Arctic conditions create all kinds of audio phenomena. The human brain is wired to find patterns in random noise. Same reason people hear satanic messages in Led Zeppelin when you play it backward." "To hell with your psychology bullshit," Collins hissed, fingers constricting until I felt my pulse hammering against his grip. "You think I don't know my own mother's voice? She's saying things only she would know. About the tree fort Dad built before he shipped out to Desert Storm. About the night I broke my arm falling off the garage roof. She's calling me by my childhood nickname, Robbie Bird. Not Collins, not Robert. Robbie Bird." His voice cracked on the last syllable. "Nobody here knows that. Nobody." I pried his fingers loose one by one. "You getting any sleep at all?" "Some." His eyes flicked toward the window where frost etched intricate fractals across the glass, like something had painted them with frozen breath. "When I take enough Ambien to drop a goddamn horse. That stuff will mess with your head, Collins. Especially mixed with sleep deprivation and whatever psychological hell stew we're marinating in up here. And sometimes I hear Mallory too." He cut me off, words barely audible. "Standing right outside my window, whispering. Damn it, Deck, I can hear his teeth clicking when he talks." The temperature in the room seemed to plummet, the heating system suddenly irrelevant against the cold that spread from my gut outward. "What's he saying?" Collins's face contorted. "He's asking for his face back. Says he can't see without eyes. Can't feel without skin." A violent shudder rippled through him. "Says I could help him, if I just go outside. Just for a minute. Says it wouldn't even hurt much." I'd seen shell shock before. Pulled men from bombed-out Humvees outside Fallujah, whose 1,000-yard stares could have looked straight through steel. But this was different. "Listen to me very carefully," I said, gripping Collins's shoulders hard enough to feel the bird-fragile bones beneath his thermal shirt. "Whatever you're hearing, It's not your mother. It's not Mallory. It's something else. Something using their voices like digital camouflage. I wasn't even sure I believed what I was saying. Promise me you won't go outside alone. Not for any reason. Not even if Jesus Christ himself is calling your name through a damn bullhorn. His bloodshot eyes locked with mine, something almost like relief washing over his haggard face. Yeah. Okay. I promise. His shoulders slumped, tension draining like arterial spray, leaving him hollow-eyed and slack. But Deck, he glanced at the window again. What if it's really them out there? What if they need help? What if they're trapped somehow between here and somewhere else? Then they can fucking wait until morning, I said with a conviction I didn't feel. Nothing good happens at 3 a.m. in this godforsaken icebox. Nothing. I pressed 2 pink Benadryl into his palm, mild enough not to screw with his head more, but enough to help him sleep. Take these. Get some rack time. That's an order, specialist. He nodded, swallowing the pills dry with a grimace that twisted his face. When I was sure he was asleep, I checked the window. The frost patterns had changed, forming what looked disturbingly like a skeletal handprint pressed against the glass from the outside. 5 elongated fingers splayed wide, the palm creating a melted spot that dripped condensation like tears. 2 nights later, we were back in Observation Post Charlie, same concrete coffin perched on the same damned rocky outcrop. Base claimed it was a routine rotation, but we all knew the truth. They wanted us to record that heartbeat signal again, the same hellish pulse that had coincided with Mallory's death. This is weapons-grade idiotic, Klein muttered as we hauled our gear up the ice-glazed path. We should be evacuating, not playing ghost hunters in the goddamn Arctic Circle. Orders are orders, Parker replied. Just do the job and get out. Collins had been unsettlingly quiet since we left base, eyes constantly scanning the terrain as if looking for something specific among the identical snowdrifts. You hanging in there, Collins? I asked as we set up the radio equipment, the ancient Soviet hardware humming with life as we calibrated the frequencies. 5 by 5, he replied with a ghost of his old smile. Just ready to get this crap over with and rotate back to base. Maybe get some actual shut-eye in a room without windows. We established watch rotations. Diaz took first shift, then Klein, then me, with Collins and Parker getting a straight 6 hours of rack time. Maybe Parker thought sleep would help Collins straighten out. Maybe he was just tired of dealing with the kids' increasing instability. Either way, I didn't like it, but questioning the lieutenant's judgment in our current situation would do more harm than good. The night dragged on, winds battering the bunker like artillery fire. At 0255, Klein woke me for my watch, his gloved hand covering my mouth to stifle any noise as I transitioned from nightmare to reality. All quiet, he reported. Except the wind saying my sister's name now. Cute touch, right? My blood went cold. You too? He shrugged, a nervous jerk of shoulder that betrayed more than he'd intended. Imagination's a bitch when you're sleep-deprived and freezing your face off. But his eyes told a different story as he collapsed onto his cot, pulling the sleeping bag over his head like a shroud. I did that same head count out of habit, Parker snoring with military precision, Klein's huddled form radiating tension, Diaz muttering something in Spanish that sounded like prayers. But this time, Collins' cot was empty, the sleeping bag thrown back, his boots missing from their precise position by the foot of the bed. Not again, I breathed. Diaz. Diaz. He came awake instantly. What? What is it? His eyes snapped into focus, taking in my expression. The empty cot, the implications crashing together like dominoes. No way. Collins is gone. The words hung between us like a death sentence. We both knew what had happened to the last person who wandered outside alone in this godforsaken place. Wake the others, I ordered, already pulling on my Arctic gear, fingers fumbling with clasps and zippers. Check the head first. Maybe he's just taking a piss. But the bathroom was empty, the toilet seat cold to the touch. The exterior door stood slightly ajar. Wind howled through the gap like a living thing, carrying what sounded horribly like a woman's voice calling, "Robbie Bird, come home to mama," with that distinctive Oklahoma accent that should have been impossible for Arctic wind to mimic. Parker appeared at my shoulder, fully dressed, M9 already in his hand, chambered and safety off. "How long?" "Unknown. Less than 30 minutes. I checked everyone at 0230. "Gear up," he snapped to the group, the command cutting through our paralysis. "Standard search pattern. Buddy system or we'll be carrying more than one body bag back." We stepped out into a world gone mad. The storm had intensified beyond any natural weather pattern I'd seen in 3 Arctic deployments. Walls of snow swirling around us in patterns that seemed intentional, almost choreographed, like a ballet of white specters performing for some unseen audience. "He's heading toward the cliff edge," Diaz shouted, his voice instantly swallowed by the howling wind. "The same place Mallory." Just then, in that unnatural quiet, we heard it clearly, a rhythmic thudding coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Thud, 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 thud. The same heartbeat from the radio transmission, but no radio this time. As my watch read 3 a.m., just the sound itself emanated from the earth beneath our boots, pulsing up through the permafrost like the planet itself had developed a circulatory system. "Christ," Klein whispered. "It's not a transmission. It's actually here." The sound grew louder with each pulse, vibrating through the frozen ground, through our boots, through our bones. We followed it like a beacon, drawn forward against our better judgment, until our flashlight beams caught something huddled in the snow 30 yards from the bunker, in exactly the opposite direction from where Collins's footprints had led. Cold certainty settled in my gut before we even reached him, a leaden weight that said we were too late, had always been too late from the moment we'd been sent to this frozen hell. Collins was dead, but not like Mallory. No blood, no missing face, no obvious wounds at all. His body was contorted into a fetal position, knees drawn up tight to his chest, arms wrapped around himself like he was trying to physically hold his insides together. "It's like his heart just stopped," Parker said, pressing gloved fingers against Collins's throat where a pulse should have been. "Fear response. Vagal shock maybe. Extreme stress can trigger cardiac arrest in otherwise healthy individuals." "Look at his face," Klein whispered, turning away, the beam of his flashlight jerking erratically across the snow. "Nobody dies looking like that from a damn heart attack. That's the face of someone who saw something his brain couldn't process." That's when Diaz noticed something else. "His ID tags, they're gone," he said, voice catching like fabric on barbed wire. "Just like that guy at Station 7, the Vietnam-era soldier frozen against the wall. His tags were missing too." "What the hell is happening?" Klein demanded, voice cracking on the last word. "What did this to him? What takes a man's identity but leaves everything else?" "I don't know," I said, my voice sounding hollow even to myself, like I was speaking from the bottom of a well. "But we need to get him inside before whatever it is comes back, or before we end up like him." By the time we returned to base next morning, hauling another body bag across the tundra that seemed to actively resist our progress, we were shells of ourselves, hollow-eyed, hollow-chested, moving like marionettes with half their strings cut. 2 men dead in impossible ways. The next day, I cornered Captain Rayburn in what passed for his office, really just a converted supply closet. His desk was an old fire door balanced across 2 rusty filing cabinets. When I barged in without knocking, I caught him staring at a creased photograph. A woman with copper hair smiling on a beach somewhere, a gap-toothed little girl in a sundress perched on her hip. He shoved the photograph in the top drawer so fast the frame cracked against the metal. "Sergeant Hartfield." His voice could have stripped paint. "This better be important enough to ignore basic military courtesy." "2 men are dead," I said. The knot of rage I'd been nursing since finding Collins was expanding in my chest, threatening to detonate. Mallory with his face peeled off like an orange rind. Collins scared to death with his dog tags surgically removed. We found a goddamn soldier frozen in midair since Nam, for Christ's sake. I slapped both palms on his makeshift desk hard enough to rattle his coffee mug, black liquid sloshing over papers he didn't bother to save. This isn't some half-assed communications check, sir. What the absolute hell is really going on up here? Rayburn's shoulders sagged as if I'd punctured something vital. You think His voice caught. You think I have all the answers, Hartfield? That I'm sitting on some classified intel while sending my men into a meat grinder? He barked a laugh devoid of humor. I came here 2 months ago expecting a standard signals assignment. Monitoring Russian activity, cataloging transmissions, by the numbers bullshit. He leaned forward. Then the anomalies started. He waved a hand vaguely. Not just equipment glitches. Signals dropping out mid-transmission. Radio equipment cycling on by itself. Batteries draining in minutes. Men. His gaze flicked to the drawer where he'd hidden the photo. Men vanishing on routine patrols, one after another. He reached for his coffee, noted the tremor in his hand, and abandoned the attempt. The Canadians fed us this line about atmospheric conditions, solar radiation, magnetic pole shifts. He snorted. But they kept pushing us to investigate, in secret. No written orders, no official parameters. Just keep looking, keep monitoring. So here we sit, trying to make sense of something that... He swallowed hard. Something that defies every scientific explanation I've ever heard. His candor gut-punched me. I'd expected the standard Pentagon stonewalling. Classified need-to-know horseshit, not this raw confession. The man was scared, legitimately frightened in a way I'd never seen from command. The Rangers, he continued, his voice dropping to something between a whisper and a prayer. They have stories, passed down from their great-great-grandfathers, about something ancient sleeping beneath the ice. He pulled his bottom drawer open, extracted a metal flask, and took a pull without offering me any. That radio pulse we record at 0300? They have a name for it in their language. Translates roughly to the heartbeat of the one who sleeps below, and every time we log it. He capped the flask with precise, deliberate movements. Every single time it coincides with disappearances or sightings. My mouth went desert dry. Sightings of what, exactly? Rayburn's eyes met mine. Things that have no business being in our world, he said. Things that wear shapes almost human, but not quite right. Like someone described people to them over a bad radio connection, and they're approximating. I left his office with my skin crawling and a copper taste in my mouth, like I'd been sucking on pennies. Over the next 36 hours, I pieced together fragments of intel from anyone willing to talk. Kitchen staff who'd served here for decades, rangers who'd worked solo patrols, maintenance techs with eyes that darted to corners where shadows shouldn't fall. I began to understand why Rayburn kept that photo close. Up here, memories of the world outside were the only tether to sanity. And that tether was fraying strand by strand with each passing day. The morning after, Lieutenant Parker cornered me in the mess hall. "Hartfield," he murmured, sliding onto the bench across from me, eyes darting to make sure no one was in earshot. "We need to do something. Take some goddamn initiative. We can't keep losing men like lab rats in some messed up experiment." I nodded, stirring the gray-brown slop in my bowl. What the kitchen claimed was beef stew, but smelled like wet cardboard and tasted like the MREs we'd found expired in a bunker outside Fallujah. "We need to figure out what's triggering it," I said, pushing the tray away. "The signals, whatever the hell those things are." Diaz, who'd barely spoken 10 words since finding Collins frozen in terror, suddenly leaned across the table. What about those towers on Rayburn's map?" His voice was hoarse, like he'd been screaming in his sleep. "The ones marked with red triangles during the briefing? 3 of them form a perfect equilateral triangle around this base." He sketched the formation with his finger on the table. "If they're broadcasting something that's..." He paused, glancing over his shoulder. "Waking up whatever sleeps beneath the ice." I nodded slowly, memories clicking into place like rifle parts during a field strip. The ranger, Mikitak, he specifically mentioned a sleeping heartbeat being disturbed by metal voices from the sky. I leaned in closer, the 4 of us now huddled like we were sharing state secrets. What if those towers are doing the disturbing? broadcasting on frequencies that resonate with whatever's down there. So what? We just grab some C4 and go blow them up? Klein asked incredulously, spearing a chunk of mystery meat with enough force to bend his fork tines. Based on some ranger ghost story? We don't even know if they're connected to our dead guys. We don't know that they're not either, I countered, something cold and determined hardening in my chest. Right now, I'll try anything that might stop whatever turned Mallory into a science experiment and scared Collins to death. You got a better idea, Professor? Because I'm all ears. To test our tower theory, we slipped into the communications room at 0245, that dead zone between shifts when the night operators had glazed over and the morning crew was still brewing coffee. Staff Sergeant Willis, who owed me a favor from a poker game in Kabul, let us borrow the equipment to send an encrypted distress signal to HQ on what should have been a secure channel. Instead of the expected crisp acknowledgement from some duty officer in Anchorage, we got 15 seconds of static that sounded almost wet, like something breathing through fluid. Then came that heartbeat pulse, not just louder than before, but somehow more present, as if broadcasting from inside our skulls rather than over radio waves. Parker lasted 3 seconds before ripping the headphones off with a strangled scream. That was the moment we knew we were truly alone out here. No extraction coming, no backup, no rescue. Just us against whatever lurked beneath the permafrost, pulsing inside the storm, whispering between the stars. To my shock, Rayburn didn't shut down our makeshift operation. Instead, he called us into his closet office and laid out topographical maps with transmission towers marked in red grease pencil. I can't officially authorize destruction of U.S. government property, he said, voice flat as he meticulously avoided eye contact, focusing instead on a coffee stain shaped like Greenland. But if it's the only way to stop these anomalies, he exhaled slowly. Do what you have to do. Quietly. If you succeed, I'll cover your asses. If you fail. He finally looked up, eyes hollow. Well, nobody's coming to check on us anyway. We plan to hit Tower 7A, 23 miles northeast across the tundra, a structure that, according to faded documents from the 60s, was built for ionospheric research. But according to the Rangers, it had been constructed directly over a site their people had marked as forbidden for centuries. If those transmissions were disturbing whatever slept beneath us, maybe shutting it down would buy us some peace. Or at least time to figure out an evac plan. We requisitioned thermite charges from the emergency demo kit, signing them out as equipment testing in extreme conditions. 12 hours later, we loaded into 2 band vans, 6 Americans including Parker, plus 3 Rangers who'd volunteered with expressions suggesting they'd rather be riding into hell itself, which in retrospect wasn't far off. This is beyond fucking insane, Klein muttered for the 10th time as our vehicle crawled across the featureless white expanse, the articulated tracks grinding against hidden ice with a sound like broken glass being chewed. We're literally hunting ghosts with explosives. How is this my life? Better than sitting in that concrete tomb waiting to join Mallory and Collins, I countered, checking the detonator wiring for the 3rd time. At least we're doing something. We drove for 4 hours under a sky that sagged so low and heavy it felt like a ceiling about to cave in. Halfway to the target, the wind kicked up without warning, 0 to 80 knots in under a minute, creating a ground blizzard that cut visibility to arm's length. That's when Diaz started seeing things in the snow. His eyes widened as he pressed his face against the side viewport, breath fogging the glass. "You see that?" he asked, tapping the frost-rimed window with a blackened fingertip. "There's something pacing us out there." I squinted through the white hell, seeing nothing but dancing ice crystals. "What's it look like?" Diaz swallowed hard. "Tall, bipedal, but the proportions are all wrong." He gestured at his own body. "Arms too long, legs bent backward at the knees, like a goddamn flamingo. And it's keeping perfect pace with us at 40 clicks per hour." I saw nothing but snow, yet somehow I believed him. The same way I'd started to believe that we'd stumbled into something from outside normal reality. After what felt like days compressed into hours, we crested a ridge and spotted Tower 7A through breaks in the whiteout, a bizarre metal structure that looked like mankind's middle finger thrust defiantly into the Arctic sky. 200 feet of latticework steel jutting from the ice, bristling with parabolic dishes and antennae that didn't match any communications equipment I'd ever seen in years of service. At its base huddled prefab buildings half buried by drifts, their windows dark and empty as eye sockets. We parked the bandvans 60 yards out, the Rangers muttering prayers in their native tongue as we exited into the storm. That's when I saw what Diaz had been talking about. Emerging from behind a half-buried shipping container, the standard Connex box warped and twisted as if crushed by enormous hands. A silhouette took shape against the driving snow. It stood easily 9 feet tall, with limbs that moved in impossible directions, its head crowned with enormous branching antlers that seemed made of translucent bone or ice. Ijirak, one of the Rangers whispered, using a name I'd heard them use in hushed tones around base. Black antlers. Lieutenant Parker's face went slack. "Sweet Mother of Christ," he breathed. "We need to kill that thing now," Diaz shouted, raising his M4 and chambering around with a metallic snap that the wind immediately swallowed. "Weapons free," Parker ordered, military training overwhelming terror as he shouldered his own rifle. "Fire!" 4 of us opened up simultaneously, the bark of rifles shockingly muted in the strange acoustics of the storm. I emptied half a magazine in a disciplined 3-round burst pattern, aiming center mass on the creature's torso. What happened next defied physics. I watched in stunned horror as our muzzle flashes seemed to stretch and elongate, the supersonic rounds visibly slowing mid-flight until they hung suspended in the air like hornets frozen in amber. Then they simply dissolved, metal sublimating into nothing but smoke. The creature, the Ijirak, lurched forward with a motion like time-lapse footage played at the wrong speed, covering 30 feet in what looked like a single stride. It slammed into Corporal Tungulik, a ranger from the second vehicle, who didn't even have time to scream before a crackling layer of hoarfrost erupted across his body. Within seconds, Tungulik was encased in a crystalline cocoon that shimmered with its own internal light. The black antlers thing reared back, emitting a sound like metal being torn apart. "Fall back!" Parker bellowed, firing wildly as we retreated toward the vehicles. "Get to the bandvans! Covering fire!" Private Napayok, one of our remaining Rangers, went down 10 feet from the vehicle, clutching his throat as arterial blood sprayed across the snow in a high-pressure arc. I hadn't seen what hit him. There was no gunshot, no visible attack, just a sudden eruption of crimson that steamed in the frigid air before freezing into ruby droplets. The black antlers flowed across the ground toward him, more liquid than solid now, reaching the fallen Ranger in seconds and crouching over his convulsing form. "Set the charges while it's occupied!" Parker shouted, yanking the thermite bag from my shoulder. "We may not get another shot!" I grabbed half the thermite blocks and sprinted toward the base of the tower, boots crunching through snow. That's when the situation went from horror show to complete disaster. Klein, our own goddamn squad mate, suddenly lunged at Parker, wrestling the thermite charges from his grip. "No!" he screamed, ripping out the detonator wires with frantic movements. "You're not blowing up this tower, you fucking idiots! They said they'd protect me if I stopped you." "Klein, what the actual hell?" I grabbed for his arm, but he shoved me away with shocking strength, sending me sprawling into a snowbank 5 feet away. His eyes had changed, pupils blown so wide the irises were just thin blue rings around bottomless black pits. "They speak to me when I sleep," he raved, spittle freezing instantly on his beard as he backed away, clutching the mangled detonators to his chest like precious relics. "Every night since Collins died, they promised me safe passage, a way out of this frozen nightmare." "Who said?" I demanded, fighting to stand in snow that seemed to actively resist my movements. "Rayburn? The brass back at Elmendorf?" "Not Rayburn," Klein hissed, voice dropping to a guttural whisper that didn't sound entirely his own. His head twitched at an unnatural angle, neck tendons straining against his skin. "Them. The ones beneath the ice. The ones between. They've been here for so long, Deck. So fucking long. Waiting. They'll protect me if I protect what's theirs." "Klein, for Christ's sake, listen to me," I pleaded, inching closer with palms raised. "Whatever they promised you, it's bullshit. They killed Mallory. They killed Collins. They're killing us all, one by one. You don't understand," he screamed with such force that blood vessels burst in his eyes. "They'll save me. I've seen what's coming, Deck. What crashes through when the ice gets too thin? We're all dead anyway. At least this way I get out." Parker tackled him from behind, the two men tumbling across the snow in a tangle of limbs and curses. I scrambled toward the scattered thermite charges, fingers numb as I tried to repair the damage Klein had inflicted. Behind me, the Black Antlers entity finished whatever it was doing to Napayok, whose body now lay still. The creature turned toward us, its antlers somehow larger now, more elaborate, extending 20 feet above its amorphous form in fractal patterns that hurt my eyes to follow. I fumbled for my sidearm, stupid, futile, but instinct overriding reason, and squeezed off 2 rounds at the approaching monstrosity. The first bullet seemed to hit an invisible barrier 3 feet from the creature, stopping mid-air with a sound like a tuning fork being struck. The second round never left the barrel. My Beretta's slide froze solid, the bullet trapped inside as the metal split lengthwise with a crack like breaking bones. Through the driving snow, I saw Klein break free from Parker, staggering to his feet with a dazed expression. Blood streamed from a gash above his eye where Parker's wedding ring had connected with his brow. He took 2 stumbling steps away from us, disoriented. That's when I heard it, a voice coming from behind him. The voice was mine, perfect in every inflection and cadence. "Come here, Klein. It's okay. I forgive you, brother. Let me help you." "Deck?" Klein turned toward the sound, confusion washing over his bloodied face. His eyes locked with mine, the real me, 15 feet away, then darted back to the source of the voice. "But how are you?" "Klein, don't listen!" I screamed, lunging forward through snow. "That's not me." But the wind swallowed my warning, or perhaps something else intercepted the sound. Klein took 2 hesitant steps toward the voice, reaching out with a gloved hand. What happened next will haunt me until I die. The snow beneath Klein's boots bulged upward, as if something enormous had pressed against it from below. He had one moment of clarity, his eyes meeting mine with sudden understanding, before he was yanked downward with such force that his shoulders dislocated with audible pops. The ice split open beneath him, not cracking naturally but parting like lips to reveal a darkness deeper than mere absence of light. Klein managed one ragged shriek that cut off as suddenly as if someone had thrown a switch. Then nothing. The snow closed over the spot where he'd stood, sublimating into a perfectly smooth surface unmarked by footprints or disturbance, like he'd never existed at all. In a moment of desperate clarity that cut through the panic and confusion, I grabbed the one remaining thermite charge with intact wiring from where Parker had dropped it. "Cover me!" I shouted to no one in particular and sprinted toward the tower's main support strut, a 12-foot diameter pillar of steel anchored in concrete that disappeared into the permafrost. 5 feet from the tower, and I could go no further, an invisible barrier as solid as concrete halting my momentum. I hurled the thermite charge with every ounce of remaining strength, aiming for the narrow gap between 2 support plates where bare metal was exposed. The charge hit its target and slid down into the crevice, but the remote detonator in my hand clicked uselessly when I pressed it. Dead, frozen, sabotaged. In desperation, I fumbled for my Zippo, the silver one my father had carried through 2 tours in Vietnam, and flicked it open. I hurled the lit lighter at the thermite charge, a 1 in a million desperate throw. By some miracle, or perhaps by the intervention of powers countering whatever protected the tower, the Zippo lighter landed directly on the exposed primer of the thermite block. For one terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the magnesium ignited with a chemical shriek that cut through even the howling gale, white-hot flame erupting in a controlled inferno that quickly reached temperatures hot enough to melt steel. The tower's support strut began to glow cherry red, then white, metal running like wax as the thermite did its job. Something within the tower emitted a high-pitched whine that rose in frequency until it passed beyond human hearing. "We need to move!" I shouted to Parker and the one surviving ranger, grabbing the lieutenant's arm, dragging the crystallized but alive rangers one by one, and carrying them into our vehicle. As our driver gunned the engine and the tracked vehicle lurched forward, I caught one last glimpse of the scene behind us. The black antlers stood atop a perfect dome of snow, its massive rack of antlers silhouetted against the sickly sky, pinprick eyes, if they were eyes at all, following our retreat with predatory focus. "This isn't over," Mikitak muttered from the bench across from me, dark blood freezing in elaborate patterns across his parka, where shrapnel from the tower had caught him. His eyes never left the rear viewport. "We've only made it angry, and now it knows we're trying to fight back." Back at base, chaos reigned in the cramped medical bay, a converted storage room with 3 field cots and medical equipment that belonged in a museum. The wounded Rangers lay under thermal blankets, their limbs propped up on pillows to elevate the strange crystalline frost still clinging to their extremities. The ice was slowly receding, leaving behind mottled black and blue flesh like third-degree frostbite, but their vacant eyes stared at the ceiling, dilated pupils unresponsive to the penlight Doc Kazan kept flashing across them. EKG monitors beeped with heart rates hovering around 40 beats per minute, too slow for survival, yet somehow they persisted. "Tried naloxone, amphetamines, even a shot of epinephrine straight to the chest," Kazan muttered, dark circles under his eyes making him look like a raccoon. He hadn't slept in 36 hours. Physically, they're alive. Neurologically, it's like nobody's home. Their brains show activity, but it's wrong. Delta waves when they should be producing beta, like they're in permanent deep sleep while wide awake. Or like something else is using the circuits, one wounded Ranger whispered, blood seeping through the bandage on his shoulder. Rayburn stalked the narrow space between the infirmary and command center, a distance of maybe 30 feet that he'd turned into a repetitive circuit. He hadn't shaved in days, gray-flecked stubble making him look a decade older and 50 pounds lighter than when we'd arrived. When he spotted us in the corridor, he abruptly changed direction, grabbing my arm with fingers that dug in like talons. "Report. Now." His breath smelled of coffee and cheap whiskey, voice pitched low enough that it wouldn't carry to the comms techs monitoring nearby equipment. "The tower's still broadcasting," I confirmed, removing my arm from his grip as tactfully as possible. "We made contact with the entity. It took Klein, pulled him right into the ice." "Christ," Rayburn muttered, raking bony fingers through hair that was falling out in clumps. "Did you at least damage the transmitter?" "Structural damage only," Parker reported, wincing as Doc Kazan's assistant applied butterfly bandages to the gash over his eye. "Klein sabotaged the thermite charges before we could place them properly." "Sabotaged?" Rayburn's bloodshot eyes narrowed. "He was compromised," I explained. "Said they were speaking to him in his sleep. Promised him safe passage out if he protected the tower." "Damn it," Rayburn breathed, slumping against the wall. "It's happening faster now, breaking them down quicker. First they take anyone wandering alone, then they take the ones who separate during missions. Now they're turning us against each other." 10 minutes later, we were crowded around a folding table in what had once been a janitor's closet. Rayburn had spread multiple maps across the surface, military topographical charts marked with towers, outposts, and mysterious locations labeled with code names. "The source of everything," Rayburn said, tapping a location deep in the wilderness, "seems to be here." He indicated an expanse labeled simply Dead Lake on the military map, and at this point, we need to take some big risks. "So what's your plan?" Parker asked, leaning in. Rayburn looked each of us in turn, measuring our resolve. "We have to hit the primary transmission tower, the likely source of the heartbeat signal. But to reach it, we must cross this lake." A heavy silence fell over the room. "This is suicide," Diaz finally said, cradling his injured arm against his chest. Frostbite had claimed 2 of his fingers, the blackened digits now wrapped in sterile gauze soaked with iodine. "We barely escaped that first tower with our lives. 1 man lost, 2 Rangers down. Now you want to cross some cursed lake to hit another target?" "You got a better idea, specialist?" Parker snapped, the tension cracking his voice. "Because I'm all ears. Should we just sit here waiting for whatever took Klein to come knocking? Radio for an extraction that never arrives? Shoot ourselves and save the ice monsters the trouble? Screw you, sir, Diaz shot back, too exhausted for military courtesy. I'm just saying what we're all thinking. This is a one-way mission. Maybe, I conceded, placing my hand on his shoulder and feeling the tension in his muscles, tight as bridge cables. But if we don't try something, more people will end up like Mallory and Collins, like Klein, pulled into the ice by voices promising safety. We moved at first light, stuffing our remaining men, 6 Americans, including Captain Rayburn, plus 3 Rangers, into the tracked vehicles, our fingers fumbling through final gear checks. Our pathetic convoy, just 2 bandvans, cut twin scars across virgin snow toward what the map labeled Dead Lake. Unlike the wind-whipped drifts surrounding us, the lake stretched before us smooth as polished obsidian. The transition line hit like a property boundary, normal snow abruptly meeting that shark-eye black with no gradient, no natural blending. On foot from here, Rayburn barked, his breath barely visible despite the cold. Single file, 5 meters apart. Step where the man ahead steps. No exceptions, no deviations, no matter what you hear. The thermite charges? Parker asked, his chapped lips bleeding as he spoke. Split the load. Essentials only. Rayburn's voice flat as the lake itself. Everything else stays behind. We climbed out, the warmth of the bandvan's rattling heater instantly sucked from our bones. The air burned my lungs, still, breathless, waiting. The Rangers prodded the black ice with titanium poles that sang high notes when they struck the surface. We followed like ducklings, placing boots exactly in predecessors' footprints. The thermite packs dug into my shoulders, each pound of explosive a physical reminder of our plan. Through the ice, far too thin for this climate, I could see dark shapes moving below, almost as if they were watching us. And then, quarter-mile in, from our left flank, drifting across that mirror-black expanse, I heard a voice that shouldn't exist. Collins' voice, slicing through the silence. "Deck, help me. I'm freezing out here." Perfect pitch, perfect cadence, that Oklahoma drawl smearing his words together just like he did after 3 beers. Can't feel my damn legs no more. Diaz locked up mid-stride, his spine ramrod straight. "Christ, that's him," he hissed, his lips blue-white, flecks of frozen spittle clinging to his stubble. "It's fucking Collins, man. I swear to God." "Ignore it." Rayburn's voice cracked with genuine terror. "Whatever voice it steals, whatever words it uses, don't look, don't answer, don't acknowledge." "But it sounds exactly..." Diaz's head swiveled reflexively toward the voice. "Eyes front!" Parker slapped command back into his voice. "That's not Collins. He's dead." The thing using his voice belongs to the lake. I clamped my teeth until my jaw ached, focusing on Diaz's boot prints ahead. The chorus expanded. Mallory's voice joined in, then others from base. Each one perfect, each one calling my name with an intimacy that only the dead should know. Halfway across, the black ice beneath our feet suddenly clarified. My heart stuttered, skipping beats as the ice revealed what lurked below. Right there, below the ice, were humans. Suspended in ink-dark water and caught in freeze-frame drowning poses, some wore modern Arctic camo, others faded uniforms decades obsolete. Arms stretched ceiling-ward, fingers splayed, backs arched at impossible angles. Against the underside of the ice pressed their faces, eyes wide, mouths stretched in expressions that could be either silent howls or blissful smiles. Decades of vanished personnel, perfectly preserved like wet specimens in formaldehyde. Jesus Christ. Diaz barely made sound, just shaped the words with numb lips. "They're moving down there, tracking us." "Keep walking." Rayburn didn't turn his head. "Don't look down." We quickened our pace, ice moaning beneath our boots like a living thing in pain. As we passed overhead, the suspended bodies rotated, tracking our movement with precision. I locked my gaze on Diaz's broad shoulders, but couldn't block my peripheral vision. Pale fingers stretching upward, lips mouthing words against the ice just inches below my feet. After a nightmarish eternity measured in heartbeats, we scrambled onto the far shore, Solid rock, normal snow, scraggly vegetation proving real things could still grow here. Each man exhaled like he'd been underwater the whole crossing. "Never again," Parker wheezed, hands braced on knees, vapor streaming from his mouth. "We blow the bridge to hell before crossing that damn abomination again." Rising shakily, we turned toward our target. Older and bigger than the previous installation, the tower jutted from granite like a rusted nail through flesh, its central spike stabbing 300 feet upward, surrounded by half-buried buildings. No natural ice would form the patterns coating every surface. Spirals and angles organized into intricate symbols, identical to those etched in Station 7's walls. Along its framework pulsed red lights, not in standard aviation sequences, but in complex rhythms matching the vibration humming through my boot soles. Each flash painted the snow blood red for split seconds. "There it is." Rayburn's voice mixed dread and resolve. "The infection's heart. The needle that punctures reality." "Looks like a regular comms tower," whispered an American private named Thompson, voice cracking mid-sentence. "It wears that shape to fool us," Rayburn replied, cinching down his pack straps, checking the thermite charges. "What it truly is predates radio, predates us. Now move. We need to finish before the sun peaks." I felt it in my marrow. Whatever waited at that tower had been anticipating our arrival for centuries. We split in two after 90 seconds of terrain recon. With his rifle muzzle, Parker gouged an attack plan into packed snow, stopping repeatedly to flex fingers that shook with uncontrollable tremors. "Hartfield, Diaz, with me on demo," he barked, voice sandpaper rough but still clinging to his West Point cadence. 30-second fuse on primaries, sync to secondaries. "Rayburn, take those Rangers, do your whatever the hell it is. 20 minutes to plant an arm. Then we haul ass behind that ridge." Like someone playing corpse in a slasher film, Parker's facial muscles twitched with fractional movements. "This'll actually work?" Thompson whispered to Rayburn. "Blow the tower, mutter your mumbo-jumbo, and these things. Just go back to nap time?" Rayburn's weathered face might have been carved from the same granite we stood on. "Back in '62, the Soviets must have woken it with their hardware. We put it down, but now it's different. Hungry, stronger, fed well. All we can do is try." "Fantastic," Diaz muttered, slamming around into his M4's chamber with unnecessary force. "I'm inspired. Truly." The sky above us twisted inside out as we approached the perimeter. The normal blue-black Arctic ceiling sickened into radioactive pond scum green as the aurora jittered awake. "Keep your eyes down," Rayburn hissed as we deployed. "Peripheral only. That ain't just pretty lights up there." "Charge one set," I croaked into my throat mic, counting down the synchronized detonation in my head. 19 minutes, 45 seconds. And just then came the sound. A roar that punched into my sternum hard enough to make ribs flex. Through swirling ice mist, I saw it emerge from behind the main building. A Black Antlers variant, but scaled up like someone had hit it with a force multiplier. Its joints bent backward, then sideways, long limbs folding in origami configurations my brain rejected outright. Where its face should be, nothing existed. "Contact front!" Parker's voice cracked, muscle memory tripping circuit breakers in his panicked brain. "Multiple tangos, 12 o'clock. Hold your positions. Watch your fire." He shouldered his M4 and squeezed out a textbook 3-round burst. The sound immediately sucked into the vacuum quiet. As expected, half the rounds simply vanished into the creature's non-flesh. Others froze mid-flight, hanging in air like houseflies trapped in amber before dropping as misshapen lead nuggets. "Weapons don't work," I shouted, my voice strangled. "Switching to demo." I thumbed the detonator on the first thermite charge, half expecting nothing. The magnesium resisted, then sputtered to life with a chemical shriek, hungry white-hot flame raging up the support beam. Even the supernatural cold couldn't deny laws of thermodynamics. "Cover me!" I yelled at Diaz, who, despite knowing better, emptied half a magazine in stuttering bursts. Diaz's eyes bulged above his balaclava, whites showing in complete rings. "Jesus, they're everywhere. Can't," he stammered. training and terror playing tug-of-war with his frontal cortex as more black antler silhouettes materialized from nowhere. "On the big one." I slapped his shoulder hard enough to leave a bruise. "All that other shit's just theater. Stay focused." 20 yards right, Rayburn crouched with 2 Rangers, military radio clutched in his white-knuckled grip. He desperately barked coordinates into the handset, his voice clipped with barely contained panic. "Command, this is Permafrost Actual. Entity contact confirmed.
Requesting immediate air support at these coordinates." Static answered him. Not normal radio interference, but something alive, pulsing with malevolent intelligence. "Diaz, second charge, northwest leg," Parker shouted, scarlet rivulets streaming from both nostrils, freezing into ruby beads on his chin. "I got east, Hartfield, primary junction box."
I reached the junction box, sweat freezing on my forehead as I wired the thermite charges with trembling fingers. My thumb hovered over the detonator. "Now!" Parker's voice cracked through the chaos. I fumbled with numb fingers, striking the magnesium starter once, twice, sparks dying in the supernatural cold. On the third try, it caught. The thermite charge ignited with a chemical shriek, magnesium burning bright enough to sear retinas. The creature recoiled from the pure scientific fury, heat at temperatures no living thing could endure. The tower's supports began to melt, metal running like quicksilver. A shockwave knocked me backward. I hit the permafrost with bone-breaking force, head cracking against ancient ice. The world narrowed to a tunnel of fading light. But in that moment, I noticed something even more horrifying. As consciousness slipped away, what I saw, partially buried in the ice, were metal pods. Clearly human-made, the compact military-grade surveillance equipment was all around the perimeter. Not Soviet relics, but modern tech with active status lights. And even deeper, exposed by the explosion's fury, titanium drill casings driven into the permafrost, positioned in a precise geometric pattern around the tower. The realization lasted for a split second before everything went dark. They'd been digging. On purpose. They hadn't sent us to stop something. They'd sent us to wake it. My eyes opened to the familiar sight of hospital lights, with IV lines in both arms, and for some reason, restraints around my wrists. A doctor with a face I couldn't quite focus on checked my vitals. "Parker? Diaz?" I croaked through parched lips. A voice answered from the doorway, a man in a charcoal suit with a lanyard bearing NSA credentials. Mission casualties were extreme but acceptable. Acceptable? The word tasted like blood in my mouth. What the fuck was down there? Why were there monitoring stations? You knew. You all knew what we'd find. "Classified," the man replied without emotion. "Your unit encountered a previously unknown atmospheric phenomenon resulting in mass hallucinations and severe environmental exposure." Lies. I struggled against my restraints.
"There were drilling rigs, fresh ones, and surveillance gear, military grade. You baited that thing. You woke it up on purpose." His expression remained blank, but his pupils constricted slightly, an involuntary tell. "The cold can cause extreme paranoia, Sergeant. You're confused. The experimental station was monitoring aurora patterns. Nothing more." "What happened to my team?" I demanded.
"They're receiving appropriate care." His tone made clear the subject was closed. 2 weeks later, they transferred me to Walter Reed. Government-issue fluorescents, antiseptic-soaked air, walls painted that specific shade of institutional beige scientifically proven to induce maximum depression. 2 brass-laden officers conducted my debrief, recording my testimony with expressions calibrated to reveal absolutely nothing. "Where's Rayburn?" I asked repeatedly. "Captain Rayburn has no record of Arctic deployment," the senior officer, a full-bird colonel with eyes like taxidermied shark specimens, replied without checking any documents. "That's impossible. He ran the operation. He knew what was out there." The colonel's expression never changed. "Medical record indicates moderate frostbite with accompanying stress-induced psychosis consistent with hypothermia and sleep deprivation." He slid a velvet box across the table containing a bronze star with citation text so vague it practically screamed cover-up. "Remainder is classified Umbrella 9. Standard 6-month medical furlough approved.
Discussion of Operation Permafrost with unauthorized personnel constitutes Section 794 treason under U.S. Code. We clear, Sergeant. The junior officer, a twitchy major with a right eyelid that spasmed every 14 seconds, leaned forward. Off the record, Hartfield. Forget whatever you think happened up there. So with that single warning, my questions remained unanswered.
And years later, it's clear as day, I will never be the same man who boarded that transport in January. The stranger in my bathroom mirror wears my skin like an ill-fitting suit, eye sockets carved too deep, premature wrinkles spreading like stress fractures. At exactly 3 a.m. every night, I jolt awake to the rhythmic pulsing that matches the recording frequency we monitored. The heartbeat grows stronger each year as the Arctic warms. If this letter finds you, just know, there's a secret war happening in northern Canada, and it has nothing to do with sovereignty or mineral rights. It's about something ancient, a power far beyond human understanding. But most importantly, the real monsters aren't ancient things beneath the ice. They're the men in government offices who think they can control them. And they might be sitting across from you right now, wearing a face you recognize, watching to see if you remember too much. That's the end of this story. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel. It would help me out more than you can imagine. I appreciate you, and I'll see you soon.